Live from our studios here at Kokomlemle in Accra, Ghana. This is Connect Africa with me, Carlos Keloni. Tonight, the volatile 2026 for Africa as SBM Intelligence warns of rising jihadist violence in West Africa. We'll go deep into that. And also, Uganda heads to the polls this Thursday, and warships from China, Russia, Iran, and South Africa on Friday began a multinational naval exercise in South Africa territorial waters. And of course, this is Joy News. We are your home of independent, fearless, and credible journalism. We cannot go for some news from around the continent.
Uganda heads to the polls this Thursday, but opposition leaders say the election is being overshadowed by political repression and the detention of government critics. Opposition figure Bobby Wine has made the issue of political prisoners central to his campaign, with his National Unity platform holding a prayer service for those currently detained. Among the most prominent critics is Winnie Yanyima, wife of jailed opposition leader Kizza Besigye and executive director of UNAIDS. Yanyima dismissed the vote as a farce, accusing President Yoweri Museveni of running a militarized state. She said Uganda maintains only a thin veneer of democracy, with state institutions effectively captured by the president and security forces loyal to him. Analysts largely agree that the outcome of the election appears predetermined, given Museveni's long-standing hold on power. Voters in Cotonou on Sunday turned out in large numbers to cast their ballots in Benin's parliamentary elections, widely seen as a key test of the country's political transition following recent constitutional reforms. The vote is taking place under heightened security, coming just weeks after an attempted military coup in December. Footage from polling centers shows steady queues of voters, with electoral officials verifying documents and registering participants as the process gets underway.
Très important, soit qu'en soit maire, député, quoi qu'en soit le poste que Dieu va les occuper dans ce pays, qui travaillent avec la crainte de Dieu. C'est Dieu qui les a mis là. Tout le monde n'est pas habilité à être député et tout le monde n'est pas habilité à être président. C'est que prend un poste, qui n'a qu'à savoir que c'est Dieu qui l'a mis là et qui n'a qu'à travailler avec la crainte de Dieu.
The elections are being contested by 5 approved political parties, including the bloc aligned with President Patrice Talon and so-called systemic opposition linked to former President Thomas Yayi. Warships from China, Russia, Iran, and South Africa on Friday began a multinational naval exercise in South African territorial waters under a China-led BRICS Plus initiative. The 8-day drill, dubbed Exercise Whale for Peace 2026, runs from January 9 to January 16 with Simon's Town Naval Base, South Africa's principal naval facility, serving as the operational hub and venue for the opening ceremony. The exercise comes at a time of heightened global tensions, with U.S. naval forces currently deployed off the coast of Venezuela, enforcing a selective blockade and having seized several oil tankers in recent weeks. Speaking at the opening ceremony, a Chinese naval officer said the drills are aimed at safeguarding key air and sea routes while expanding international cooperation and participation. Hundreds of residents have been forced to evacuate their homes as wildfires continue to rage across parts of South Africa's Eastern Cape for a 5th day. Footage from the Oyster Bay area shows flames sweeping through forested lands as firefighters battle to contain the blaze. Large swaths of farmland, natural vegetation, and several residential properties have been affected. The Kuya Municipality Fire Services ordered the evacuation of residents in Lindenhof as a precaution following renewed flare-ups near Oyster Bay. Emergency crews have also been carrying out controlled burns across sections of the bushfield to prevent the fires from spreading further. However, strong and shifting winds have worsened conditions, causing some fires to reignite. According to Mario Ferreira, a project coordinator with humanitarian organization Gift of the Givers, the scale of the fires have overwhelmed local emergency services.
Well, those were stories from across the continent. Meanwhile, Africa is said to face a turbulent 2026 as political instability, economic pressure, climate shocks, and rising security threats converge. According to a new analysis by SBM Intelligence, West Africa is particularly at risk with jihadist violence surging amid political fragmentation in the Sahel. The continent is increasingly caught between competing global powers in a ragged football pitch, quote unquote, of international influence, leaving governments strained and regional stability in jeopardy. Now, analysts warned that the dramatic event of 2025, including crisis in Nigeria, for instance, and beyond, could set the stage for an uncertain and potentially destabilizing year ahead. Well, I have been joined on Zoom by Mutaro Mumuni. Mukhtar, he is the Executive Director of the West Africa Center for Counter-Extremism. And, of course, Austin Aigbe is a security analyst and also from West Africa Democracy Solidarity Network Advocacy Officer. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us here on Connect Africa. First, your initial thought on this particular report by SBM Intelligence. Let me start with you, Mukhtar.
Well, thank you for this. What we are seeing is significant in terms of its implications for security in 2026 and moving forward. But those of us who are in this space do not necessarily find it shocking or surprising in any way, because many of the incidents that have been captured are past incidents, some of them as recent as last month, many of them months past and years past. And if you put the pieces together and provide the linkages and map that with the on-the-ground vulnerabilities, you can project a potentially perilous future for West Africa. And we have seen that play out in many ways within the West African sub-region, traditionally the Sahelian and coastal states of West Africa. If you notice, many of the countries captured are countries that are currently struggling and dealing with insecurity and violent extremism. Ghana comes in. It's a nation that has been straddled, surrounded by others that are currently dealing with violent extremism. And there's a very inherent reality that we have similar vulnerabilities that could be exploited by terrorist groups. And so it's worrying enough to elicit response from state actors in ways probably we have not seen before. And I think that we should respond to it in ways that can lead us to building resilience against insecurity within the sub-region. Right.
So we'll explore that here on Connect Africa. Aigbe, you agree when Mutaro said this is not surprising at all? The report from the SMB.
No, not at all. I do agree with him very strongly. Even ECOWAS has started preparing ahead. Last month, ECOWAS heads of state agreed and released certain funds, about $5 million to about 8 countries in the region. But Ghana wasn't part of that list, but Nigeria, Benin, Cote d'Ivoire, a few of those other countries were given, but mostly not all of the countries in the Sahel got that fund. So what is important is that there's need for cooperation, regional cooperation. One country cannot do it alone at this time, because if you try to pull out people, push the insurgents out of Nigeria, you're going to push them close to Ghana. Of course, we know that Nigeria shares border with Niger, and of course, Benin, but more of Niger in the northern side, along that Sahel belt with Burkina Faso, along that area. And Burkina Faso does share border with Ghana. So it's a challenge for West Africa at this time, particularly when the cooperation in West Africa is poor, with the exit of Sahelian state and the Sahel belt, which largely has been occupied largely by this insurgent group. How do you now try to fence them out? Becomes a real challenge for countries who can cooperate, like Nigeria, Benin, Ghana, but because of the pre-colonial existing border that existed to date, that cooperation has weakened. So there is need for further cooperation. We may see worse because there is these other three countries, the Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali, has become like hideout for the insurgent group when you push them out from the ECOWAS part of the region. Talking about cooperation, we know that over the years, ECOWAS has really not been as strong as one would expect. Who should be leading that particular cooperation agenda for the sub-region? Mutaro, that goes to you.
Well, I mean, ECOWAS is a lead, regional entity that is in charge of regional security, that shapes the regional security policy and strategies for member countries. And so it's expected that ECOWAS is strengthened in terms of capacity and operational capacity to look at, in terms of operations and the policy direction to ensure that we take charge of regional security in this space. And I hear you make the point or the remark that ECOWAS has been weakened or challenged in some sense. It is true. I mean, there's been some serious situations of weakness we've seen in terms of its capacity to deal with regional security. But we have recorded significant successes that I think we need to focus on and see how we can replicate those successful experiences in dealing with regional security, especially when it comes to political instability, as well as the issues of violent extremism within the sub-region. The near coup situation that happened a couple of months ago, in fact, less than that, in Benin, would have been a huge blot on the image of West Africa. And I think that ECOWAS did a great job with the leading role of nations like Nigeria, including Ghana and others, in helping to prevent that eventuality. And I think that we need to expand that operational capacity to ensure that we do not tolerate any other kind of situation from happening. But it's easier to say this than looking at the mechanics of preventing that happen, because we need to go further to looking at the fundamentals, the drivers of coups and instability, as well as violent extremism. We need to look at the economic, social, and the cultural underpinnings of instability within the sub-region. That we would continue to discuss it and analyze it in ways that we have always done. We are not looking at the youth bulge. We are not looking at youth vulnerabilities. In terms of youth unemployment, issues of integration, issues of marginalization, governance deficits and development deficits have been widening because the needs of society keep expanding, and yet it does not get a matched response from state actors and development organizations. Right. And that is a big focus, or should be a big focus of our interventions. How do we address the issue of youth vulnerability in the sub-region from the state level before we even get to the sub-regional level at ECOWAS? What should states within the West African sub-region be doing themselves to address those vulnerabilities? What we are seeing regional level is a manifestation of what is happening at national levels. Right. And so we need to take interest in what happens in each and every country within the sub-region, because the spillover phenomenon is real. It is real across the board. And so we need to be interested in terms of what are the fundamentals that hold nations together in terms of building for prosperity. Young people graduate from school, and yet we have less than 20% of them who get employed, and the rest, keep wandering around. There are a lot more who do not get to pass through the formal educational system. And they just, drinking and wasting away their life. If you look at the report by the UNODC currently, you would be devastated in terms of the huge numbers of young people who are smoking and drinking away their lives. We're seeing a huge pandemic, a crisis of drugs within West Africa. that will hit us in ways that mean we will not be able to contain. So we need to be looking at development indices that map our capacity to address now and future, development needs, creating jobs, sustainable jobs for young people, addressing development gaps, infrastructure, and ensuring that it's an environment provide sustainable platform for youth success and achieving their aspirations.
Right. Well, let me bring in Austin. With rising jihadist violence in the Sahel and part of West Africa, how do you see these security challenges affecting democratic institutions and civic participation, for instance, in the sub-region?
Well, let me build it up from the question you earlier asked, Mutaro. The truth is that ECOWAS is super ready. ECOWAS has gotten to the point where some form of sovereignty, state sovereignty, tend to impart on its capacity to fully deploy at the national level. For instance, ECOWAS can't just come into your country without your sign-up. Talking about Benin, attempted coup that was crushed by Nigeria and, of course, ECOWAS, was because of the invitation of President Patrick Talon. If that didn't happen, that approach, that so-called military action that took place in that country will never happen. So today, ECOWAS had what they call the standby force that provides support to countries. Whether today they are in Gambia, today they are in Benin, and I think they are also in Syria. They are in Syria alone, following the attempted coup of 2023 November.
Right.
So the ECOWAS continue to do those deployments. But straight to your question, to ensure that level of security, there is need for regional cooperation beyond your national outlook. So when ECOWAS gave out that relief fund to countries facing security and militia group, Islamic State and all of that, I was not too happy. I thought that resources should have been used to further strengthen the standby force to move and coordinate appropriately. Ghana has already sent personnel to the standby force. Nigeria does that. Virtually all the countries that remain within the ECOWAS fold has done that. What you need to do is to strengthen their capacity.
How do we strengthen the capacity
in those particular areas of?
How do we strengthen
part of it is strengthening. Financial strengthening. Right now, I think I can't remember the total cost for that it would take to fully deploy the standby force. It is not with training. These personnel deploy from the national level. They've already got training, financial strengthening for in terms of procurement of arsenals and all of that, and intelligence. Intelligence is key. It is not enough for kinetic approach. Not kinetic approach is very fundamental. And for not kinetic approach, I think that's where the national government has a role to play. But today, with the failing standard of democracy, with democracy backsliding very quickly, leaders at the national level are not able to deliver democratic dividend, thereby increasing the pool where insurgents can recruit from. For instance, in Nigeria, there are about 22 million out-of-school children, a huge pool for recruitment. If we can cut those recruitment base for Islamic State to get access to, there we can begin to address certain issues. For instance, too, marginalization, governance deficit, like Mutaro has mentioned, and of course, what's also important is justice. So today, Catos are rustled from people, and the next thing, they don't get justice. Before you know what's happening, they get recruited very easily. I think we should focus on the drivers of insecurity at the national level. Of course, hunger, poverty, unemployment, as already mentioned. Beyond that, it's a regional cooperation that tends to address a non-kinetic approach beyond just mobilizing arms and boots on the field to crush people when there's a recruitment base that is very high.
All right, talking about the intelligence issue that you just touched on, given the transactional nature of extremist networks, how important is regional cooperation, and what challenges hinder effective collaboration across the West African state?
First, intelligence is very key. Without intelligence, we cannot achieve this assignment of ensuring a security-prone area in West Africa to be actually very severe in a way that people can truly live well. So the whole essence of government is the welfare and security of their citizens. That's the whole totality of government. At ECOWAS level, there is a protocol. There's a protocol which member states are signed to on democracy and good governance. Good governance is fundamentally important if we must address insecurity in our region. And for intelligence level, if we see militia group running away from Nigeria and heading towards Niger, cooperation is not happening. So you may not be able to send message to Nigerians to say, Nigerians, they are heading towards your location. Can you block these houses? It may not happen. But if they are heading towards Benin, that cooperation can happen. If they are heading towards Ghana, maybe, because there is no boundary between Ghana and Nigeria. So it will be an uphill task. But on the other side, where you have Senegal, the Gambia, of course, maybe not Sierra Leone and Liberia, but on this other side, you can have that cooperation with Cote d'Ivoire, the Gambia, and of course, Senegal. That level of cooperation can be very effective. But when you have these three countries standing in the way, in between, it actually has, it slows down the level of intelligence that can enhance to keep these guys out. That can happen in Nigeria. Nigeria lost intelligence with Cameroon. And of course, when they move on to the other side of Cameroon, Nigeria could not move into Cameroon, and they were stuck in Nigeria. And the insurgency had their way. They could reorganize and move back to Nigeria. If that intelligence works, we can truly wipe out these militia groups.
So let me come to you, Mukhtar. You agree that these three Sahel states, pulling away from West Africa or the ECOWAS poses a lot of security threats to countries in the region. Is it important at this point to try to bring them back, or how do we deal with the situation as it stands now?
Well, what I see happening with the alliance of Sahelian states, it's manifolds. One, clearly, the alliance in itself does not necessarily pose a threat to West Africa.
Right.
It depends on our relationship and the kind of mechanisms that we institute in place in terms of dealing with them that determines determines the kind of security challenges that would emanate from that, reality. I think that at the moment, what we need to do is to be able to strike or initiate a kind of mechanism or relationship with the alliance of Sahelian states that enhances inter-agency and inter-regional cooperation amongst, regional bodies within West Africa.
Right.
This is not the first time we are having sub-regional, groupings within, a same space like West Africa. We have the Mano River, the Mano, group in here that has been there for so long. We do not necessarily need them to salient the alliance and rejoin ECOWAS to be able to, to frame a kind of mechanism that works for us. We just need to calibrate our relationship with this member state, these three countries, in a way that enhances our cooperation in terms of collective security and stability within the sub-region. If you've been following what they're doing, they seem to be practically, have moved significantly of progress. And so we need to take advantage of their commitment to the alliance and ensure that we institute mechanisms that is in the interest of our regional security and stability.
Right. Well,
that's what I see. And I want to make the last point on Mr. Austin's point about, the approach, the politic approach. I think all who are involved in this space highlight the reality that politic approach is counterproductive to security, especially when it comes to preventing violent extremism. It is the same reason why we failed in the Sahel to deal with terrorism. So it's counterproductive for anyone to be focusing on kinetic approach dealing with security within the sub-region. We need to commit to, significantly to human security and human rights compliant measures that elevates, our focus to what I call meeting, the needs of citizens, ensuring that our commitment is aligned, building the foundation that allow young people to succeed, that allow, livelihoods to thrive, and ensure that we are building resilience against violent extremism in the sub-region.
Right. As we wrap up this conversation, considering current trends, how do you assess the security outlook for West Africa over the next 5 years, and what role can civil society play in mitigating the threat we've been talking about here? Briefly, Mukhtar, 1 minute.
If you put everything together, gives you a potentially perilous picture. And I'd say so in many ways. We have a long, unremitted or unaddressed huge vulnerabilities within our spaces. And the risk and the threats that we are facing expose those vulnerabilities that can keep us or put us in potentially very perilous situations. We are not seeing significant commitment in terms of investing in young people in ways that match the vulnerabilities around young people. We are not seeing significant investment around civil society action and non-state actions within West Africa. And if you notice, the civil society space in the last couple of years has been significantly undermined in terms of funding, in terms of operational space here. And if it continues, we're going to see a potentially perilous situation for security within West Africa.
Right. Thank you so much, Mukhtar, for speaking to us. Austin, your last word on the role that civil society can really play in ensuring or mitigating the threat we face on the continent, especially in the sub-region.
Well, first of all, there's a trust deficit in the region. Trust deficit in a way that governmental institutions, state actors really don't trust the non-state actors. So civil society is standing between whether they become governmental institutions, because you cannot act as governmental institutions, but what you can continue to do is to engage in some form of peace building, peace negotiation, and keep on that, informing citizens, empowering citizens with information, and ensuring that government does the right work, that does the right thing, particularly with provision of social amenities and etc. But importantly, let me quickly state this before we go. Look, the Sahel state does not trust ECOWAS at all. And we need to understand that cooperation may be very difficult when you have a trust issue. Nigeria Airlines mistakenly dropped in Burkina Faso. It took a lot of conversation for that to be released. And in today's West Africa, or West Africa as it were, there's almost a certainty that somebody is after the president of Burkina Faso's life. So to release information to ECOWAS, we mean releasing the life of Burkina Faso's president, Captain Traoré, to ECOWAS, and they will resist every attempt for anybody to have their information, particularly intelligence information. I think first of all, we must build trust with the Sahel state, involve citizens, and build an ECOWAS of states. An ECOWAS of the people. The time is for ECOWAS right now to involve the people in its power architecture. We must move beyond ECOWAS of state so that the people can begin to have a say in what happens in the region.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. Thank you, Austin Aigbe from Nigeria, as well as Mutaro Mumuni from Ghana, for helping us understand this threat that we face as a sub-regional body, ECOWAS, on the continent. Thank you so much. This has been Connect Africa with me, Carlos Scaloni. You can log on to our website, myjoyonline.com, for more story. Bye-bye.